Phil Sheridan's got a lot of good stuff right now up at ESPN.com's NFL Nation regarding Carson Wentz. Everybody keeps talking about Bradford. I'm sure we'll get into him a little bit. But what's this mean for Wentz now that Bradford is here? How do they ultimately want to see him handled moving forward? And as Phil writes, the Eagles have dealt Carson Wentz a similar hand as Donovan McNabb. Is there some comparisons that can be made? We bring Phil Sheridan into the conversation here on the Sports Bash 97.3 ESPN. Rookies report on Friday, and Carson Wentz on the field for the first time. Phil, how are you, pal?
Doing fine, Mike. Yourself?
Doing good. So Bradford's in. We're all peachy keen, ready to go for the voluntaries. Now that means Carson Wentz. What is next for him? How do you see the Eagles kind of handling him now that Bradford's here and everything seems to be, I guess, A-okay for the time being? What is the plan moving forward for Wentz now?
Well, they haven't been completely clear on exactly how they plan to do all this, but the obvious model that they're following is the Andy Reid model from 1999, and that's when Doug Peterson was brought in as the backup quarterback who would start for a while Donovan McNabb, the number 2 pick in the draft, learned the offense and got ready to go. And Andy Reid was, pretty much willing to have McNabb sit the whole rookie year if it worked out that way. And the difference, of course, between Wentz and McNabb is that McNabb played at Syracuse. He played in Division 1A, major college program, whereas Wentz is coming from the lower level, what they now call the FCS level, from North Dakota State, and has not played against, really high-level competition for the most part. And, the game's going to be a little bit faster for him. So this seems to be a little bit more of an acclimation for Carson Wentz to get to the next level than there was for McNabb. So, in 99, Peterson started the first, I think, 7 or 8 games. McNabb played little spot roles in some of those games, got in for a series here and there, ran a play here and there, and then finally started about the way through the season and held on to the job the rest of the way. So that could happen. I mean, if Wentz is doing well and learning the offense and things are going well, and Bradford either isn't playing that well or he gets hurt, which we've seen Sam Bradford do, then it wouldn't be surprising if Wentz is able to, be the starting quarterback by the end of this current season that's coming up. But I think the plan is for him not to have to start, to have Bradford run it and, kind of be the quarterback and get the team running. Because one of the things Reid wanted from Doug Peterson back then was instead of having a rookie quarterback running the offense, when everybody else was running a new offense, he wanted the quarterback at least to know where everybody needed to be, who needed to be lined up where, correct mistakes in the huddle and that kind of thing. So the guy on the field needs to know the offense at least as well as the coach does, and that's why Bradford is going to be the starter at least going into this. Having a rookie learning the league, learning the offense, and also having to deal with a whole other group of 10 guys on the field maybe making mistakes or running the wrong route or whatever. That was a picture that Reid did not want to see taking place in front of him on the field. So then all those factors are in the mix here. When Wentz is ready and the offense is ready for him, I think then you'll see, you'll see him out there. Whether that's this year or it takes until next year, that remains to be seen.
Yes, and the interesting thing would be, you mentioned Bradford's propensity to get injured. If 7 or 8 games into the season, let's say something similar happened to last year where he had to miss a game or 2, at that point, do they go to Chase Daniel or Carson Wentz? Does it really matter where they are in the season, whether they would feel comfortable going to Wentz? Do you legitimately feel like their plan is that they don't want him to play at all?
I think that's their ideal, their preference. I mean, I would love for Carson Wentz to come out on the field the first day and just look, like an all-pro quarterback from day one. I mean, if that happens, they'll adjust. I mean, you're not going to, keep a guy not playing forever, but the goal, or at least the plan, is to have Wentz not have to play. I mean, if he has to play and he can play, those are different things. But if you don't have to put him out there and you set things up so that Bradford starts, and I think the other thing about all this is, when Chip Kelly was here for the 3 years, they ran all the up-tempo offense and they ran a zillion reps in practice, and everybody got plenty of work. So everybody was kind of getting ready all the time. And was prepared to go into a game if necessary. The Andy Reid method, and which Peterson is going to follow here, in that system, everything's much, it's more slower paced. They practice things, in a very, sort of very structured kind of way. Not coming up with the right word there, but it's very structured. And the starting quarterback takes about 90% of the reps in practice, and the backup quarterback, the number 2 guy, probably takes the other 10. So the third quarterback, which would be Wentz, at least at the beginning of this, isn't going to be practicing very much, once the season starts. So he's probably not going to be ready. Now, if Bradford gets hurt, my guess would be that Daniel would be the number 2, and he would start if Bradford was going to miss a game. If Bradford was going to be gone for a month or 6 weeks or something, my guess is that Daniel would start immediately. But give him the chance to get some practice reps now. They would take a very close look at Wentz every week and see how he was doing. And if he was getting ready, they thought he was ready to go into a game, then by the end of that process, they might try, giving Wentz some time. So it's going to be very fluid as far as how it all shakes out. They have 3 guys. They're paying 3 guys a lot of money. Bradford is the starter, and Daniel's number 2, and that's what Peterson's been saying, from the jump here. So that's how it stacks up right now. But if Carson Wentz comes out there and he just looks like he's ready to go, and he is the guy that they hoped he would be, that could all change very, very quickly.
Phil Sheridan, ESPN.com's NFL Nation, 97.3 ESPN. There's so much to this story here where now that Bradford is in here, his statement was sometimes the business gets in the way. Ultimately, do you feel that was the purpose of this mini little stamping your feet, his little tantrum, if you will? Did he feel that the business got to him? Did he not want to compete for something? He's been questioned about his competitiveness. What do you feel that his little tantrum in the end was all about?
Yeah, I think basically when they traded up to get the number 2 pick and basically said, we're taking a quarterback with that pick, then it was very clear to Bradford that they were going to draft. If you're going to give up that much and use the number 2 pick in the draft for a quarterback, that's going to be your quarterback at some point. Not in 5 years, not in 6 years, but within the next year or so. So, Bradford looked at it. All right, I signed here thinking I was going to have a chance to be the guy. I'm not going to get that chance. So I think he and his agent looked at it and said, the Denver Broncos are probably the most likely target for them as a team that might trade for a quarterback, a team that just won a Super Bowl with a retiring Peyton Manning, and now had Mark Sanchez that they got from the Eagles, but basically were in need of a quarterback. So going into the draft, I think they thought if we just use it, try to use this little ploy to get pressure on the Eagles to make a trade, that maybe something could be worked out, and Bradford could end up in the Denver Broncos camp as their starting quarterback, going to a team that just won a Super Bowl with a great defense. Be a pretty good situation for Bradford. But once that didn't happen, once the draft was over and the window for trades pretty much was closed, and the Eagles weren't going to trade him anyway, I think all Bradford did was, he said he was going to come down to these things because that was what he had to say while he was trying to force the trade. But I think the plan all along was if the trade couldn't happen, he was going to be back and get back into the swing of things. So I don't think this is a big change of heart that he came back. I think that was just the plan. He had to show that he was willing to walk out and cause a disruption to try to put pressure on the Eagles to trade him when that window for a trade was open. It was a very narrow window, and the Eagles weren't interested in trying to go through that window anyway. But once it was over with, I think this was always the plan. It's just, all right, try to leverage, try to make a maneuver then when you could get out, make it happen. That'd be great. But once the Broncos drafted Paxton Lynch in the first round and, pretty much set their quarterback situation up, with no Sam Bradford in it, and there's really not any place else. You don't want to end up in Cleveland probably, and the New York Jets are still a possibility, I guess. But if the Eagles weren't going to try to trade him, and nobody else is pushing that hard to get him, Bradford's best, really his best chance is to come back here and just, play well and create a market for himself for next year.
So, Phil, in other words, he was willing to have egg on his face and come back with his tail between his legs, and I guess that's a theory of he knows he will be accepted when he comes back. Is that why he's willing to do that? Is that the assumption that, hey, I know my teammates and they understand that this is the business that we're going through? Because a lot of people would wonder, all right, are the teammates going to have his back when he comes back?
Yeah, no, and that's a legitimate concern. Ron Jaworski basically said that, and Ron Jaworski knows a little bit about playing quarterback in the NFL, and knows a little more than I know. So I will certainly defer to Ron as far as that part of it goes. But I do think that players now, they know how it works. I mean, Fletcher Cox is not in there either. Nobody's going to, they're not going to look at Fletcher Cox, sideways when he gets back, because it's just, this time of year is about the business aspect, getting things set up for yourself and trying to get, make your point if you have to make it. And, last year Evan Mathis did it, and Chip Kelly cut him, when the regular minicamp came around in June. So, it happens with players this time of year. What the part that Bradford missed, I mean, they weren't even on the field, really, yet they were, working out and going to meetings and kind of getting the basics of the offense down. So, for Bradford, it's not like he missed anything that's really going to affect the team or the season or his preparation for the season. He did not. He did not miss that part of it. He's back now. He'll be there for, all the camps to come and, right through the mini camp in June. And so, I think players kind of get that. And, nobody's going to look at it. Some fans may feel differently, when the preseason starts in August. But once the game's starting, you're actually on the field playing as the Philadelphia Eagles. Bradford will have been there at that point for, 4 straight months without any interruption. I don't think it's going to be a big deal at all. I think the players get it, and I think Bradford will, he has the next, few weeks here to kind of build bridges and, mend any damage that was done.
Yeah. So the follow-up I was going to ask you is, do you think everyone has moved on? Will there be any residuals when this team comes to training camp in July? Will we still be talking about this, or do you think by that time the fences would be mended, he's the guy, and, we will not be talking about Sam Bradford's 2-week tantrum?
Yeah, I think that'll pass. Like I said, I'm trying to remember anything that happened last year during this time of year. I do remember that Mathis wasn't there because Chip Kelly ended up cutting him, so it became an issue that Mathis boycotted it. But the players, the other players, I mean, I think if you have 60 or 70 guys, I guess 90 of them all together, but you have a team worth of guys out there working together every day, doing stuff, in the weight room, going to meetings together, and one guy's missing. I think there's a little bit of sort of irritation that kind of forms there with that stuff. Players understand it, and like the guys that play with Fletcher Cox on the defensive line, they get that he's doing what he has to do, or thinks he has to do, or his agent thinks he has to do. But there's a little bit of it's not ideal.
Yeah,
these guys are all going through this stuff together. To not have the guy there. So, if Bradford missed all of this stuff in May and only showed up in June for the mini camp, I think that might, have some residual effect when training camp begins. But I think this little gap here between the draft, now the rookies are just coming in, the team won't really be on the field as a unit until next week for the first time, and he'll be there for that. So I think this will all blow over, and there won't be really any damage done.
Phil, you go back a couple of years ago when Kerry Williams missed, and he was getting sconces and taking his daughter to dance lessons, and the fans were up in an uproar. How could this guy, he just signed, how could he not be here? I don't remember there being any residual effects from his teammates on that.
No, not really. I mean, I think guys kind of got to Kerry as a little bit of a different guy, and did things differently. And he had just won a Super Bowl and gone through that whole process with the Ravens right before free agency started. So his season went all the way into February, and then he signed a free agent contract, and he did take a little extra time, and he showed up eventually. I mean, he missed a little bit of it, but he did show up eventually. And fans don't like it, and nor should they. I mean, we all work very hard for what we make for a living. These guys are making many times what any of us, and it doesn't look like a whole lot of hard work. I mean, they're playing a game basically by definition. So you can understand people not liking it, but again, as far as the players themselves, all in that group, they all understand. They have short careers. They have X amount of time to make the money that they can make. And while they're doing that, they have to do certain things from the. So if the guys have to feel like they have to do that to get a point across to a team, the other guys understand it. I mean, they appreciate it. The fans don't have to like it, and it's understandable that they don't. But for the players, I mean, they could be in that spot themselves in a year or two. So, don't want to be too judgmental about a guy doing what he thinks is best for himself. Again, very short careers, very limited time to make the money that they're going to make. So guys kind of give them a pass on that stuff.
Phil Sheridan, ESPN.com, NFL Nation, covers the Eagles. Let me get, we mentioned Fletcher Cox. Any update on him at all? Are they close? Are they not talking? Something happened before training camp. Do you know any update on his status?
No, I really don't. They've been very quiet about it, and his agent's been very quiet about it. They're not really getting anything from either side at this point. The Eagles just keep saying, it's a priority. He's the guy they want to have on their team. But the reality is they have, this year, and they can use the franchise tag on him for 2 more years after that if they wanted to. So they have the leverage to basically control his rights, his NFL rights, for the next 3 years without doing anything. That's their leverage, and they have the ability to use it. They'd like to get it done and get that over with and make sure everybody's, happy and going forward. But they're not just going to hand them a blank check right now because they don't have to. If they get to next year and you're looking at the franchise tag, which is going to be a lot more money, then there's more pressure on them to try to get a long-term, more cap-friendly deal done. So it could take all of it, into next year. I don't think it'll happen. I think they really want to get it done. If Cox's side is reasonable about it, and the Eagles, seem like they. If you look at what they're doing with the other guys that they're signing, they're handing out, market to slightly above market contracts for guys like Vinny Curry and Malcolm Jenkins and Lane Johnson, and they're giving real, solid market contracts to their current players. Now Cox is going to be, he's a really rare commodity in the NFL right now, and they see him as a franchise type defensive end. Defensive tackle, whatever he's going to play in this system. It's going to be more than those guys got, and that's why it's going to take a little longer. But I think that, I don't think it's going to be that disruptive. I would think that Cox will come in when the mandatory camp is going on, and just kind of get back to normal at that point. But, it's the business side does get in the way at times, as Bradford put it, and that's what's happening with Fletcher Cox right now.
Let's move on to some other. There's other topics with the Eagles. Can you believe Bradford's not everything? Everybody out there, but he's a big story. It was a pretty unprecedented story, very polarizing. People on both sides of the coin, but he's back. So rookies in on Friday, Phil. Last year's rookie class, Hicks gave him a lot. Then he got hurt. Other than him, Rowe and Aguilar got on the field, but not a huge impact. They didn't get a lot from last year's rookie class. Is there 1 or 2 guys in this rookie class that you think could make an impact starting when they get in on Friday?
Yeah, it's going to be interesting because, last year they had picks and they used them on players, and some of those guys, got on the field and were pretty, they were valuable, if not huge difference makers. But this year they just, the number 1 pick, obviously, the idea is not for him to be on the field at all, in Carson Wentz. They had a second-round pick, so you get to the third round before you get a guy that they hope will get on the field and play some football in 2016, and that's Isaac Seumalo, the guard from Oregon State. Now they definitely need a left guard. They're not clear on who the left guard is going to be. They went out and spent $40 million to sign Brandon Brooks to play right guard, but the left guard spot they didn't really address definitively. So Seumalo's got a real chance to be in the starting lineup. When the season opens. So he's probably the guy that's going to play the most. In terms of having an impact, I would think Wendell Smallwood, the running back from West Virginia, the kid from Wilmington, I think he's going to be in the rotation, and they're going to use him. It'll be up to him whether he, demands a larger portion of the playing time. But other than that, I think it's pretty. There's a lot of late round picks that are going to be kind of developmental guys and could be on the practice squad this year, but not anybody I would expect to have a huge impact in 2016.
Real quick, we saw the Eagles the other day hire a new director of scouting, Joe Douglas. A lot of people were wondering what kind of guy would take this job. It seems that anybody who has worked next to Howie Roseman has either joined the media or been someplace else. And Joe Douglas spent 15 years in Baltimore. He went to Chicago for a year. Now he's in Philadelphia. What do you know about Joe and, the fact that he decided to come here? What does that say about him to work with Howie Roseman?
Yeah, I'm looking forward to them actually announcing this because that would help answer some of these questions. And actually getting, a chance to speak to Joe Douglas and ask him about some of this would be helpful too. Because also all we're going on now is, piece things together. It's reported that they hired Joe Douglas. He in turn hired Andy Weidel, who was a former Villanova offensive lineman who has been a scout with the Ravens for a few years. They worked together in Baltimore. They were the 2 scouts that the Ravens sent to go check out University of Delaware quarterback Joe Flacco back then. And, they're the scouts that wrote the report that basically said, hey, if we can get this guy's he's an NFL prospect. This kid from a small school and not a major program, and so they get when you're instrumental in a team drafting a quarterback that wins the Super Bowl, that is a feather in your cap for a long time. Now, he had to leave the Ravens to try to move up, and he went to the Bears for only a year. Why he only lasted a year with the Bears, it could be his family didn't like it in Chicago, or something else was wrong in his personal life that that made coming back to the East Coast make sense. So it may have nothing to do with football or the Bears or anything else. So until we can ask Joe Douglas about that, that's just guesswork. So but he's considered a really good talent evaluator. So is Waddell, the guy that he hired. So if those two guys can be free to do what they did with the Ravens, which is an organization run by Ozzie Newsome, and Newsome is really well known for not having to take credit for everything. He's really good about empowering his people, the people that he hires, to go out and do their jobs and have the freedom to do well and get rewarded for it and get the credit for it. He doesn't need the credit. He's a Hall of Fame player himself. He doesn't really need a lot of credit for being a GM, but he's been a GM for 2 Super Bowl winning teams with the Ravens, 2 totally different eras. I mean, they won, with Trent Dilfer and Ray Lewis and a great defense, the first time, and they won with Joe Flacco, and it's still a very good defense, but a lot of very different people, very few players left from one team to the other. And Ozzie Newsome built both those teams, so he doesn't have to throw his weight around to get the credit or whatever. That's what Howie Roseman's challenge is here: is to bring these guys in, and let them do their thing and not get in the way of it. And that has not been a strong suit with this organization for a long time. I mean, back in the 90s, it was Ray Rhodes and Dick Daniels fighting it out over who was going to be in charge. In the early 2000s, it was Tom Modrak and Andy Reid fighting it out. And then the last one was Howie Roseman and Chip Kelly fighting it out. So, the Eagles have been, cursed with this kind of, internal squabbling all throughout Jeff Lurie's tenure as owner, and that's a problem. And they need to kind of get past that. So the ideal, I think, here is for Roseman to bring his people in and guys who have had success and shown that they can do it in other places and let them run it. He can still be the top guy and make the major decisions, but you've got to give good people the freedom to do their job. And if Roseman can do that, this can end up being a pretty good situation for the Eagles.
All right. Joe Douglas hired to beef up the Eagles personnel. Read more about it at ESPN.com. At Sheridan Scribe on Twitter, Phil Sheridan with a look at the Eagles offseason, which the phase 2 of the workouts continuing. The voluntary OTA start on Tuesday. The rookies report on Friday. Thanks, Phil.
I appreciate it, Mike. Take care.